Our speaker today is Peter Hernandez. I'm sure everyone knows who he is. He's our District 2 City Commissioner, and he's going to talk about how his family migrated over here from Cuba and what it was like growing up as a minority. And again, we have books if anybody's interested in Kitty Oliver's article. Peter?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming out to hear my story. Quite frankly, my story is probably no different than some that you would hear from a lot of Hispanics, Cubans that migrated here from different parts of the world. But I can tell you that most Cubans have come to the United States, have landed in Miami, Hialeah. When we got here, my uncles worked for construction companies that were all union labor, and one lived in Fort Lauderdale, two lived in Hollywood. So they kind of drove my dad around to see where he wanted to go, and we also drove around in Miami, and my dad decided that Hollywood was the place that he really liked. So we lived at 69 Terrace, right off of Johnson Street. The school that I went to originally was Apollo Middle School, which it was pretty interesting. It was, showed up the first day of school, it really didn't know where to go. When I came in, the vice principal took me in and says, okay, sit here. He couldn't speak Spanish and I couldn't speak English. So it was the beginning of my communication challenges, if you would. It was also something that it was a little, a side that I had never experienced. And that is the part where you have Hispanics, you have blacks, and then you have whites. And I didn't fit in with any group, if you would, because there was only a couple of other Hispanics kids in the school. And they themselves poked fun at me because I didn't speak the language. So that was the first time that you kind of look around like okay, where do I fit in? You know, there's people I like, there's people that I don't know, but they're scary. But as time went on, there was one person that I will always remember her name, and that is Mrs. Spears. It was a teacher for the learning disabled, because that's what I was labeled, learning disabled, because I couldn't speak the language. I couldn't be in a regular classroom with the other kids because the teacher just couldn't take the time off to try to communicate with me because it was a disadvantage to the other children. So at that time, I fit right in. Some of these kids were not only learning disabled, but some of them were actually the misfits. The kids that were just caused trouble in school, so they put them in a class so they could control them. So we took a lot of field trips, and we had different ways of learning. And that was maybe sometimes was communicating through my hands and pointing and what have you. But the school system really wasn't set up to take anybody who didn't speak the language to be able to learn. So they were able to acquire a young lady who came twice a week, and I had about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and she spoke Spanish. So she was teaching me the conjugations and the words and what it was, the prime stuff that I really needed in order to be able to learn the language. And there was books that she gave me for me to read, and so that was it. 3 months later, I was actually speaking the language. Didn't know how to read and write at the time, but I could communicate. And that's where some of the bigger troubles came in, because now I could understand what the fun they were poking at me and who was doing it. And, I got into fights on a perpetual basis and got to know the vice principal on a first name basis. And whether you believe it or not, back then they used to paddle you. How many of you remember that? Yeah. So, and the choices were you get paddled or you get detention. And since when I got home from school, I had to work. I didn't want my parents to know I was getting in trouble. So I got paddled. And those things kind of forge a discipline of, if you don't want to pay the price, don't do the things that you're not supposed to be doing. But that's easier said than done, because as you're a kid and you hang around other kids, and some of them you don't know, and some of them really do want to get you in trouble. And that's their objective, is to show you off that you got in trouble. So I learned trust, who to trust, who not to trust. And so those are things that you learn at an early age. When you're an immigrant, that you don't know who your friends really are, it's tough to find out who you can rely on and who is telling you the truth and who is not. Because as I learned as time went on, trust is a two-way street. You can trust somebody, but that person needs to trust you. And you create those bonds from an early age. So the junior high part was short-lived, because then from then on I went to MacArthur High School, where the teachers were more challenging. And just like I always remember Mrs. Spears being so kind and so nurturing and taking the time to teach me, and just not only me but all the other kids who were in the class. I also remember a particular teacher, my English teacher in MacArthur High School, that it was the reason why I left school, aside from the fact that my father started the business. And his attitude was, he would come in, he would write the assignment on the board and says, you read while you're here, and this is your homework. And, well, that's peachy keen and hunky-dory, but I could read the book, but the meaning of what was happening in the book, I was still awfully young to figure it out without some help. And so homework, and you got to turn in the homework. Well, I never turned in homework. I never did, because since I didn't know what it was that I needed to do, because he didn't take the time to explain it during the class, all he would do is give the assignment and go back and sit down. And so one day I come into class and I sit down, and Mr. Renkin decides that he's going to make an example out of me. So he says, Mr. Hernandez, would you please stand up? And so I'm looking around like, okay, this is never good. So he stands up and he proceeds to go on and say how bad a student I am because I never turn any homework and everything else. In other words, he tries to embarrass me. And so when he's done, he said, sit down. And I says, no, now it's my turn. I'm going to show you what the epiphany of a teacher is, when somebody that comes in here gets paid to sit down and just write something on the board and tells you what he's got to do. Then Mr. Renkin got upset. He got up from his chair. And I said, the reason that I don't turn homework is because when I leave here, I have to go mow lawns. I have to go do roofing. I have to do whatever it is that my father needs me to do to help him so we can make a living, so we can start a business. So he didn't know what else to do, so he grabbed me by the shoulder and took me to the principal's room. And he says, he embarrassed me. And I said, well, there's part of that's true, but here's my story. He embarrassed me. And he embarrassed me without coming to ask me as to why I wasn't bringing homework. So from early on, because of what happened in junior high, I needed to know that I needed to defend myself. I just never thought that I would have to do it from an adult who was in a position of power and who was being paid to teach me. So the principal, African-American lady, she looked at me and she says, what happened? So I told her what happened. I said, he stood me up in the class and he showed me off as to what a bad student was because I didn't turn homework. But the reason that I didn't turn homework was because of these things that I have to do. I was 15 at the time. And so she looked at me, she said, well, we got to get you into another English class because he doesn't want you back in his class. And I said, no, you don't need to take me back to another English class. I said, I'm not coming back to school because, as I said, my father's starting a business and I don't need to be here if this is the way it's going to be. I don't need to be the outcast that you need to move around. And so she said, well, you're 15 years old. Legally, I can send the police for you. And I said, okay. And I will do the same thing in every other class that shows me off like this. So we made an arrangement. She wouldn't call the police and I wouldn't come back to school. So my dad opened the business and I was the person there. And I can tell you that I still remember our first customer. A young lady bought 12 bags of sand. We charged her $12 and we delivered the sand for her. And that was the only sale we had probably in 3 or 4 days. Until people started to realize that we were there. And then some of my parents' friends, they were all in the construction industry. And they come in and we had piles of, bags of cement inside and different types of cement. And he says, your son's here is not doing anything during the day unless there's a customer going. Why don't you just have him make stepping stones? See, he needed some stepping stones. And he figured that if he get me to do them, he would get what he needed. And so my dad said, that's not a bad idea. So we got a wheelbarrow. We had the cement, we had the sand and the gravel, and with a hoe, I just started mixing cement, and we started pouring stepping stones. I still remember the gentleman's name, and I kind of begrudge him because I really was just sitting there doing nothing during the day, and all of a sudden, I didn't have any free time. I was just basically working. But one of the things that I learned was if you didn't work and you didn't make the stepping stones, you didn't have products that the people wanted in order to buy, in order for you to be able to keep growing your business. So my dad told me at an early age, you need to be able to provide what people want. That's number one. But it's more importantly for you to provide what people need. There's a different thing. Some people want something, some people need something. Like if you have a septic tank and you need a drain field, you need a drain field. If you have a yard and you want to decorate your yard and you want decorative gravel, you want decorative gravel. So there's a difference between a need and a want. So the nuts and bolts of things is you provide what people need, and as business grow, you get the products that people want. And this way you can do both. But the one thing that both of my parents, because this is my story up to 15 years old, 16 years old, but when we first got here, even though my dad was able to work with a construction company that my uncles worked for, because they were able to find him a job, my mom's story was different. She didn't drive. She didn't speak the language, even though she worked in a lab back in Cuba. It's kind of hard to work in a laboratory, medical laboratory, when you don't know the language. The language was a barrier. So my mom cleaned apartments in Hallandale. So my dad had to get up early, take her to the apartment building where she would sometimes sit there and hope to have a client to be able to work that day. And if not, then she sat there all day. And after work, my dad would go back to the building and pick her up and bring her home. So one of the things that both of them said to me, you have to be grateful. We come from a place where you not only don't have freedom of speech, if you wanted to buy a piece of gum, you couldn't find it. You couldn't go to the store and get a piece of gum. You wanted to drink a soda, you couldn't buy it because it didn't exist. The stores only had certain things. And even to get those things, there was a book called La Libreta, and they tell you how much you could have, what you could have, and when you could have it. And that's if they had it. So Spain was a happy medium place. We went to Spain, we spoke the language. Even though we were foreigners, we were able to communicate with people. We were able to buy that piece of gum, we were able to buy that soda, we were able to get any of those things that you really wanted as long as you had the money. The Catholic Church used to help all the migrants that would come in, and then there were pensions, there were basically hostels, if you would, that were in business that they realized that migrants were coming and they had sponsors from other parts of the world, like my uncles were sponsoring us for us to be able to go out of Cuba. And so you would go there and you stay there until the help came in from the United States in this case, and then we would find an apartment and then we'd have our own thing. So it was in 1972 when we left Cuba, and when we got to Spain, I left all my friends and my family behind, and here we come into a place that it was kind of cold. Being from an island, Spain was cold at the time, at least to me. And when we come to the hostel, well, we didn't have the money to have rooms because we just came in. So we kind of slept in the hallways until the money comes in. So, but the second day, I looked at my dad and says, "This is what you took me out of Cuba for." to be called and hungry. My dad never forgot that. After we settled in, we got our apartment, he sat me at the table. And he said, if you're going to talk like a man, you're going to have to act like one. I will put food on your table. Anything else you want, you get. Your shoes, your clothes, your toys. And so we did. Recycling is big here now. But back in Spain, when I was 9 years old, you would see me in a dumpster looking for plastic, looking for things, looking for bottles. Because that's how I got my money. And yeah, I would go to work with my dad and he would pay me. Because he knew that I needed to earn my money in order to get to what I wanted. I don't begrudge him for that. I kind of thank him for that. Because at an early age, I found out that the reason he took me out was for me to be able to have a future. And so that is why I am grateful to this nation. Had I not be here, I wouldn't be able to talk in front of you. I wouldn't be able to tell you the story. But most of all, I would know where I've been. With my mom, who was able to work for Cordes Dow after she got here. After years of cleaning apartment, she learned to drive. She bought her own car. None of that would have ever happened had my parents not had the foresight to take us to a country that's free and you can prosper as long as you work. And I say that because a lot of our youth don't share those principles. A lot of our youth that I ran into took what they have for granted and begrudge somebody else because they didn't have it. And so one of the stories that I can think of that I remember when I was young in Apollo is listening to some of the students that were there. They were saying that their grandparent had passed away and their inheritance that the parents have and what they didn't have and what have you. And I'm looking around and I'm saying, wow, they inherit this. And then of course I'm looking at my situation in my home. I'm like, well, nobody's going to leave anything to us. So we got to work. If anything, we have to see what we can live to somebody else. So it was just interesting, the dynamics as a 9-year-old in Spain and a 12-year-old in the United States when the challenge were not financial per se because my uncles helped us out. The challenges were, okay, we're here, this is the country that we came for, and how do we actually melt in? How do we become part of society? How do we become productive? How does that change happen? Because there's no manual for it. So it was a one day at a time. That was my dad's favorite saying, one day at a time. We started the business. My parents split because of the stress of the business, among other things. My mom lived in Miramar. So we were like one city away, but it was actually on the other side of Pembroke Road. So it was like 1 block away. So we were all still, and if anybody needed anything, there was still a cordial relationship among them. My sister has her life. She moved to Miami Springs, has 2 young boys and a daughter. So, you know, we're an average family. Everything is peachy keen and hunky-dory. And then parents want to retire. So you look around like, okay, mom's over there, dad's over here. How do we melt? And the truth is, it's the same as everybody else does. You make it work. some of the challenges from my dad was he retired, and after he retired, he lasted 5 days. My dad loved to travel. Well, not 5 days, I'm sorry, 5 years. My dad loved to travel. So he kind of burned the candle at both ends, and you can't blame him for that. My mom, on the other hand, she was like taking care of my sister's kids, taking care of my sister, taking care of me, because even though when I was 19 years old, I lived with somebody that was much older than me, I still kept a room in my house. I always helped my mom with her rent. I always provided money for food, even though she didn't need it, but I always, just a force or habit from when I was younger, you always provide something to the house. And she did. She always kept my room. It was sipping, even when she had her own apartment in Century Village, after she sold a house in Miramar, bought her apartment, everything else. She had a sofa bed that anybody from the family would go in, and if you sit on that sofa, you'll eventually fall asleep. It happened to all of us. My sister, myself, my nephew, my niece. If you sat there, especially after dinner, you fall asleep. So I became like, I lived in Hollywood, lived in all parts of Hollywood. I lived on Surf Road, on the beach. I lived in the lakes, out west, on 79 Terrace, on Taylor Street. Now I live in Monroe Street, and I have properties in just about each and every one of those districts. So I remember when business was thriving and I had a two-way radio sitting on the beach, drinking a margarita and just listening to the drivers and trying to put out all the hackles. I would have never thought in my life, from my humble beginning, that I would be able to do that. Economy goes up, economy comes down. One of the things that my father learned and taught was you buy, you don't rent. So whatever property, commercial properties we have, we purchase. Equipment, don't buy what you cannot afford, but buy the best that you can afford. And I'm like, well, how does that work out? He said, well, there's different brands of equipment, find out which one's the best, and if you can't afford a new one, get a used one, but get a used one of the best. So if it breaks down, you have the ability to do it. So in my industry, Caterpillar is the leading equipment, and Mack were the toughest truck for the construction industry. So we bought Mack and we bought Caterpillar. And the rest is history when it comes to that. We were very successful. When the downtrend in the economy, we kept all of the properties. We sold the equipment that we weren't using. After the economy started coming back up, we sold one of the properties, not because we didn't want to keep it, but because the bank says we're pulling out of the state of Florida. There was a lot of financial institutions that came to the state of Florida when the real estate market was booming, and there was a lot of institutions that pulled out of the state of Florida when the financial institutions were on the downtrend. Excuse me. So we sold the property and we kept everything else. My wife is the one that runs our retail operation on Johnson Street. JC, thank you. She is the boss. And we become more of catering to the wants rather than the needs, because on a retail basis is what do people want for their yard and what have you. So we kind of change from heavy equipment, excavating and bulldozing and demolition, which is what I used to do, to more of the retail market. So if you want to know about any other thing in particular, I would ask you to tell me. But growing up in the city of Hollywood was an experience that I wouldn't change. The good parts and the bad part. Oh, thank you. The good parts and the bad parts. I can tell you that there were some social things that I've learned. I learned about the discrimination part In Cuba, we were all Cubans. We were black, we were white, we were Chinese, Jewish. We call them the Jewish Polacos, which is where they came from. There was no animosity when it comes to that. What we had were classes. People that had money and the people that didn't have money. And you were going to find in most islands, that's where the discrepancies are when it comes to their challenges. The people that have money and the people that don't have money, not necessarily the color. Here was, you look around like, okay, Anthony was African American. He was my best friend. Philip McEnany, white, redneck if you would, if you call him, he was also my best friend. I never had issues. When I went to MacArthur, there was a young man that he was like, you know, big guy, weight, he pushed me. I didn't know who pushed me. I just turned around and pushed back. When I looked down, I'm like, okay. All right, now what? And he was coming towards me. So here comes Philip, stands in front of him and says, if you're going to hit him, you're going to have to hit all of us. And the next thing I know, there's a bunch of people behind me. It was how you treated people. Just because you're big and strong doesn't make you better than anybody else. What makes you is fearful of the people that see you. But I didn't know any better because I hadn't seen him. Had I seen him, I might have not pushed him back. But it was a reaction. So my life is something about learn from anything that happens to you. And so what I've learned is, if you're going to push back, you may want to look before you push back. But that doesn't mean you don't have to push back. You just have to be smarter how you push back. That lesson has come later in life. But I've learned that you have to stand for what you believe, and you have to work hard for what you want, whether you attain it or whether you don't attain it. Some of my biggest lessons has come from my daughter, Adriana. She's always wanted to be an aerospace engineer since she was a little kid. And smart kid, really smart kid. When it comes to life and when it comes to school, she got a scholarship. And so JC and I decided that whatever was that we can do, we will do for her. Went to Broward College, Broward Community College when I went to there, Broward College when she went to, and perfect for Mom because she came home every day. But then she got accepted to University of Florida. And separation anxiety came into place, even though it was only 5 hours away. But she was, you know, a great student, great grades. She wanted to work. She wanted to contribute to her schooling because she only had a 50% scholarship. The other 50% had to be paid for. And so we told her, don't worry about that. Mom and I were going to take care of that. But she's stubborn. And so she got a job. Well, guess what happens? Her grades started suffering. Because it wasn't the 3 or 4 hours that she was working. It was the half hour or an hour before that she had to get ready to go there. And it was the half hour or 1 hour afterwards that she had to get home. It was the sleeping time that she wasn't getting. It was the studying time that she wasn't getting. So we couldn't force her to quit that job. But she figured it out on her own. And so now she's a successful aerospace engineer, and with a double as a, what's the other double that she has? Mechanical engineer. So she's a mechanical and aerospace engineer. And she's doing her thing. She's in California, God bless her. And so we're very proud of her. So JC and I, when it comes to work, she's my boss. She complains about the times that I'm not there, and she complains when I'm late, and and when I'm there, she complains because I'm there and I don't do what I need to do. But my growing up in Hollywood is no different than any other immigrant that has come to this country. I can tell you that you're getting my personal story out of this, but I think that most of the immigrants have come to this country because It's a place where you can have the American dream. And this is a wonderful country, and I begrudge some of those people that feel otherwise. And the reason why is because they come here to take. And this is a great country, but in giving is how you receive. You give of yourself. You're grateful, you give back. And that's one thing that my dad and my mom always said. When we get to a position that you can give, you give back. Because there's other people that need to be able to surge as well. And so that's what we've done. When we got to the point that we were stable family-wise and financial-wise is when I tried to become involved more and more in the city. Started with the Hispanic Affairs Council. I'm one of the members and also past president of the Hispanic Affairs Council for the City of Hollywood, which it was disbanded because there's so many Hispanics that there wasn't any need to have a special representation of Hispanics because they themselves were representing what their needs were. And they were able to go to City Hall. There wasn't that we needed to try to acculturize them and say, this is how you need to do it. But there is a need at times because most of our countries, if you own the land, you can do anything you want in them. So the zoning aspect and the zoning laws that we have is something that the Hispanic culture we're not used to. And not only Hispanic culture, but a lot of cultures are not used to. So there's still a need for a language barrier, if you would, to be able to be explained, not only with Hispanic, but with Haitians. Anybody that comes from a different country, a different island, that usually have the mentality of this is my parcel, I should be able to do what I want. And those are some of the challenges that the city has. Any city, not just Hollywood. So I wouldn't change anything as to how my youth has gotten me here. Sister Cities International is a program that got started in the city of Hollywood, and we have 8 sister cities. I became the president of that because, as I said earlier, I like to travel. We've given away fire equipment apparatus through the Sister City International program. We have had children come from different parts of the world, Israel, to perform at the Art and Culture Center. Those exchanges is what solidify the culture of the city. And the culture of the city of Hollywood, if you would, is a blend of all kinds of different people from all kinds of different walks of life. And that is what makes Hollywood attractive. And I believe that that is what attracted my dad to Hollywood. It was that blend of people that we had in the city of Hollywood. As far as my story, if you have any particular questions, please ask me. But I think I've pretty much opened myself to this group, and I thank you for being here as to why I grew up in Hollywood. Yes, Karen.